Welcome to Andrew Broussard Watercolors. If you're new to this channel, welcome. If you've been here before, welcome back. Now, for those that are new, just to give you a heads up, with this I live stream it. So it takes me about 5 minutes to prep the paper and get the palette ready and kind of discuss what we plan on doing. If you want to jump ahead to when the actual painting starts, feel free. If not, feel free to stay for the discussion at that point. Also, since I'm live streaming, there'll be people that I might comment and talk to on Twitch itself. Now, in front of me, I have a quarter sheet of Stonehenge Aqua. I'm saturating the paper. In fact, I actually started doing that before, but then I could not find for the life of me the paint that I wanted to utilize and put it on the palette. So I just restarted the film, just resaturating the paper since we're going to paint wet and wet, and this gets everything bubbled out. Eventually down the line, I would like to up the quality of these videos. Even though there's a lot of videos that have up, the channel and the Twitch, the live stream is still in its infancy. So there's not a lot of editing that takes place. Currently, I've just been putting money into the art supplies and to the lighting as well. If you ever want to support this channel, there's the Patreon account, which I have really cheap tiers for. I also have the Etsy account. If there's ever anything you want to buy, let me know. It's all really affordable and original works of art. And on top of that, just simply liking, subscribing, following is a great way to lend your support. So, saturated this paper, then we'll set up the palette. We're going to do something a little differently. We're going to play with complementary colors. We're going to use the approach that we used in previous videos with Venetian red and sap green, mixing those to get a brown, or quinacridone rose and phthalo green to mix together to get essentially like a grayish black. But today we're going to play with a combination I haven't played with yet, which is dioxide purple and lemon yellow. So this is the Van Gogh brand. I had already opened this one, so I'm going to utilize this open tube if I can get it open. If you ever have trouble opening up a tube of paint, the kind of claw crackers for crabs can help. You could also run the end of the tube underneath hot water to loosen it up. And another thing is pinch all the paint up towards the top when you twist. It makes it less prone for this metal part, the metal tube, to twist as well. It's fairly common to have those break on you. Okay, so this is the Cotman Dioxine purple. I might have been mispronouncing that my whole life. Okay. So we're going to make up an imaginary scene with this. We're going to paint wet and wet. We're going to see what type of mixture we get, what type of tone color when combining these two. And we'll play around. Let me do one last adjustment. I think if I do this, the camera will look a little bit better. I have a Kindle right here that lets me see what's going on. It's another little upgrade I set. This palette has phthalo green and quinacridone rose in the corner and burnt umber, but we're going to avoid those. We may wind up adding other colors in this mix, maybe to darken it, to push it in different directions, but we'll wind up seeing. Oh, I think I tilted it the worst way. Oddly enough, if I go this way, it'll straighten out. Yep, that looks about good. A little adjustment. All right, we're ready to get started. So I don't really have much in mind painting wise. Let's kind of throw in some lemon yellow. I feel like this one may benefit from having some pure pigment in some spots, but we'll see the overall result. Now here's the purple. I'm just going to refer to it as purple at this point due to my difficulty pronouncing the dioxine. Mixing. We hit kind of a brownish color with purple and yellow tints. Let's even after mixing, it comes out very purple. So it's an exploratory, it's playing around. We're going to make up a composition. This kind of free-form approach is very fun, and I highly recommend trying it. It really allows you to let loose. It allows you to experiment with tonal values. Here, this combination definitely has more color aspects to it than the other two combinations I mentioned, but it's good to practice and experiment. I think I did use a combination like this in oils in a live demo at the Giant Omelette Fest, which is a festival they have down here in Louisiana. Unfortunately, that will not be taking place this year. Even though it's in March, they already went ahead and canceled it due to COVID. So let's set up a far background. The things we want to keep in mind are this. Linear perspective. We want things to get smaller and to recede into the picture plane. So it's a good way to practice that. We want to increase pigment load as we paint wet and wet. This will prevent back runs and cauliflower effect. We want to pay attention to tonal values in general. As we get closer to our foreground, we can increase our darker tones. So that's kind of the aerial perspective, or what some people refer to as atmospheric perspective. And then the last thing we want to really pay attention to is just texture. This is a great way to play with wet and wet and see what can happen and what can take place. Right now we're using the large hake brush. We haven't really done anything too much texture wise. We're going to put a grouping of trees here. Since it's so wet and wet, they're going to spread out and diffuse, so we're not going to get anything that is perfectly shaped just yet. Later on we can play around with that. I'm just putting in a tree structure. So far, as of right now with this color combination, I'll be honest, it has a unnatural look to it. The only time I could think that we would see something like this is the evening, when everything might have a purplish glow or a pinkish glow to it. As you can see, I splattered some up here, so that's a great time for us to put some up here and experiment and show how we can do sky forms, clouds and whatnot. You can put them in, and you could just as easily wipe them away. So the paper towel is great for this back and forth method. Okay. Oh, I don't like the way that looks. So we just go right back in. We can play around with it. We can lift up spots. We can erase what we just put there. And we can go right back over it with it. So this approach does utilize quite a bit of pigment. And frankly, I think it's because of the back and forth of adding and subtracting. But these two paints, the Cotman, and I think the Cotman for the purple, and Van Gogh brand for the lemon yellow, they are very cheap paints. You can get the, let's see, is this 0.3 fluid ounces? I'm not sure how many milliliters that is, if it's 8 or 10. But that guy right there you can get for like $3 off of blick.com. This is 21 milliliters, so this is the more larger tube for the Cotman. Cotman makes small tubes like this as well. Something like this, maybe it's $5 or $6 for the 21. So it's not really too much of a monetary commitment, hopefully, for y'all, if you want to try out this combination. It does have a nice feel to it. Like I said, it does seem a little unnatural, but I think we can make it work and get a very pretty effect. I might have mentioned that even though we're going wet and wet, as we dab, as we lift things with the paper towel, we're essentially removing moisture, drying that spot, but adding the pigment and the water back in, we could easily re-wet it. So it's just a back and forth subtractive additive process. It really lets you let loose and play with textures. So far we've only utilized the hake brush and paper towel for texture. We'll in a bit experiment with the rigger, or the script liner, or the fine liner. There's a lot of different terms for it. And if we so choose, maybe we'll use the squirrel mop as well, since we could get some different effects with that. So build up concentration of pigment, build up your darker tonal values. This mixture, like I said, is not quite giving me a neutral tone between them, but it does push a kind of pinkish orange and a yellow. So maybe these aren't pure complementary colors. I'm not sure. I couldn't find my dioxide purple before, so I very rarely use it. You can see how this tube hasn't been used at all. But I almost gave up hope in finding it, and I Googled complementary colors of indigo, and they suggested an orange. So that might be an experiment down the line. Indigo, maybe, I can't pronounce it, but I just call it indie blue, which is indithrone. So that might be another one down the line for us. A lot of people inherently use the burnt sienna and burnt sienna, and what's the other one? Oh, ultramarine. That's like the most common complementary color you'll find in so many painting palettes. So I'm building up pigment, building up texture. I have a form taking place. just to do a little bit of rambling, just to give you guys information and research material. 2 oil painters that kind of do it, 3 oil painters that I know of that do additive subtractive process like this, but in oils, are Dennis Sheehan and Stuart Davies, as well as David Usher. Stuart Davies has copious amounts of oil painting tutorials on YouTube, and some people even say that they use his voice in the videos as ASMR to help them go to sleep. It's not like he's boring or anything like that. He has a just very nice, relaxing voice. Dennis Sheehan has some clips online, but there's a lot of information that you have to pay to access from him. And then, last but not least, there's David Usher, who has tons of YouTube videos on watercolor, watercolor, acrylic, and oil, and I believe he uses this technique for oil. For watercolor, he's more fast and loose, but I don't think he does the complementary palette. Oh, another YouTuber you can watch, there's this guy, Mind of Watercolor. He has a technique that he calls spontaneous painting, where it's the super saturated, just like we had started this one off, and he'll feed in colors. And I'm not sure if he has a plane in mind. I'm pretty sure for some of them he did have a picture they was referencing, but he would get the soft blobs like we did, and then from there he would I think do a dry off and then accentuate shapes and whatnot. So that's Mind of Watercolor, and he calls it his spontaneous painting. So those are a whole bunch of different research material, other avenues for you guys to explore this fun technique. Now, just get a little bit of blabbing out there. Let's see. Let's do a background tree back here. So compositionally, I'm just going to work on it and put things in while I throw information at y'all. The hake brush that I use is the Ranson hake brush, and we have a Facebook page dedicated to the Ranson technique, which is fast and loose painting. That's Ranson Disciples. I'm one of the admins over there, moderator, I guess, whatever the term is. And a lot of us on there do free YouTube tutorial videos. There's Joe Menza, if you're into, and this isn't like a mocking term, if you're into Bob Ross, he has a very Bob Rossian type landscapes, but with watercolor in the fast and loose. There's Lois Davidson, who has very atmospheric paintings in the fast and loose style. There's Alan Owen, who paints in a fast and loose style, more using a mop brush, and he is a fantastic painter. He has a lot out there. In his style, if you know a painter, Edward Wesson, it's very reminiscent of that. In fact, he has a lot of tutorials dedicated to the deceased gentleman. I'm just building up the forms in here while I ramble. There's also a gentleman, Watercolor My Way, I believe. He live streams on Twitch. He's a member of the Ranson Disciples as well. I don't think I've seen his tutorials yet, but I know he produces quite a few. So there's a lot of different resources out there for y'all if you're into painting, and if you're into this technique. A great use of complementary colors takes place in videos by Rick, I always, every time I mention him, and I mention him a lot, I owe a lot to him getting me into watercolors, like his free videos. He uses the burnt sienna ultramarine combination a lot and in his videos, and it's great because it's overwhelming, all the pigments and palettes that you could have set up. I spent so much time researching brands of oil paint, watercolor paint, trying to decide what I wanted to go with, and then all this time researching palettes and setting up palettes, and at the end I feel like I learned some stuff, and this was in the beginning, but honestly following somebody like Rick, or I mean I don't want to be like, oh, follow me, and trying just simple experiments, simple approaches, seeing what textures can take place, it really is, I think, a lot more beneficial than buying a whole bunch of paints and pouring them out on a palette. So like I said, here we've only used dioxine purple and lemon yellow from two brands that they consider student quality, though some people put these at the top, close to artist quality, and they should both be light fast. Yeah, Permanence A, which I think is very good for them, and 5 pluses, I think that means very permanent for the Van Gogh brands. So we're just creating shapes, just adding a little structure to this soft land. The video itself, I'll tell you right now, does appear darker than it actually is. I'm using a Samsung S8 to film. So, like I said, if this channel takes off, eventually I'll be able to buy a better filming device. So donations are always welcome. And you're always welcome to follow along with these tutorials, and I would love to see your results. And if you ever get to the point where you follow the tutorial and somebody says, oh, I love that, I want to buy it, feel free to sign your name on it and sell it. I want you guys to succeed, and we know that art supplies aren't free, so I want you guys to be able to sell a painting and get another one going. More supplies. So the rigger, I'm just using it for textural lines, just dabbing it in place for tree structures. Now is kind of the moment of truth that's coming up. With this, with watercolor, when you dry, you have a tonal shift. Everything lightens up. So we want to be aware of that, and we want to see it happening real time. So in a few moments, I'll take the blow dryer and I'll dry it off. And I want you guys to pay attention and seeing how everything lightens up. I found that the phthalo green and the quinacridone rose doesn't lighten up as much as the sap green Venetian red combination does for me. This guy, I have no idea how it's going to lighten up in tonal shift, so we want to be aware of that. A big cause of tonal shift, one paint is what is it? Payne's Gray. like a black or anything like that, has huge tonal shifts. All right, so without further ado, if you have earbuds on, let me separate that out. It's kind of easier for me to correct things and push things around at this stage as opposed to when it's dry. All right, so here we go. If you have earbuds, watch your ears. Okay, so with watercolor, you can test with the back of your hand, feel if it's still cool or not. That lets you know if there's still moisture there. In this case, we are pretty well dried off. Did have a tonal shift. Right now it's very soft looking on my end. So we did dry off in a stage where we had like a lot of water still on the paper. So I believe that often lends to a more soft look with the drying. Some people prefer this look. In fact, let me just throw a little matte over it. We're not done, but we'll throw a matte so you can see what it looks like here. I'll take these clips off and I'll put them back on in a moment. So if we were to throw a matte over it, let me adjust it for a second so you can see. And that's what it kind of looks like in a map at this point. The camera is reading it darker than it is. So you could stop at this point and see how you like that. Or what we'll do is put it back together and we'll create some hard edges on some foreground elements. Now this, if there was an area to struggle, I would say it would be this part right here. This is where you start getting a contrast between the softness and the hard edges that we wind up putting in. Let me adjust this screen a little bit more. There we go. Now we should have the whole thing. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to grab the number 4 rigger. So that's what we're using to kind of put in our thinner lines. And we'll build up a few structures in front. So I'm not going to try to pass over the exact branches that are there. I'm building up a depth to that spot. So when I mentioned in the very beginning, what you want to pay attention to is different perspectives. One in which we have the aerial perspective where things get lighter as we recede. The other is linear perspective, where as it gets closer, in general, the spot where these guys sit is going to be a little bit lower than these trees right here. We could, of course, thicken the trunks up, but I feel like that's more of an aesthetic choice. And here I'm just not wanting to do that. Take the hake. I don't want it too wet right now. I'm going to use it for a stippling foliage. Be careful of repeated patterns. So think if you had a rubber stamp that had your name on it and you're just hitting it over and over again, it's just going to say your name and have that repeated pattern. So we have a pattern that's taking place with the edge of this brush, and I can have it stamped and be the same thing, but I don't really want that repetition, so I'm going to change the way it goes, change the pushing motion, etc. Okay, so keep that in mind. Another thing is, whenever you're doing this stippling, you're obviously putting down pigment and water. And if I was to do another color or more stippling on top of it before it dries, I then start getting a wet and wet diffusion. So that might be something you enjoy utilizing or something you may want to avoid. So if you feel like you're at a point where, let me do a dry off, take a look at it, you can do that as well. Let's mix a little bit pure pigment between the lemon yellow and our purple. See if we can get a darker finishing touches. And then we'll call it done. So I'm using a sushi tray for this one. I'm not using my normal palette because I don't have my purple on it, and I just don't want to get it all, like, make another spot for it. But if you ever want to transfer stuff, let it dry, and if you're on a ceramic or a metal surface, you can take a razor blade. Be careful if you're a kid, have your parents help you, disclaimer, and you can actually just pick up that clump with a razor blade and deposit it on another palette. You could wet the bottom side of it, wet the spot, and it'll help it adhere to that spot as well. So that's a little trick for y'all. So this is kind of pure pigment, really no water being utilized. And sometimes be aware of that pure pigment and how it dries and how it looks. It might have a sheen to it. I believe that sheen is from the excessive amount of gum arabic that is being deposited. But at the end of the day, it's all about experimenting. So experiment, try things out. Like I said, this is the first time doing this watercolor combination for me, and I'm really happy with the way it came out. The drying shift wasn't too bad. The dry brush effect that I'm doing right now, I'm not getting super dark that I wanted, so down the line I may look for another pigment. I mean, it might be Payne's Gray, it might be just a lamp black or something that'd be utilized in the final stages just to get my darks. So just a few things for you guys to keep in mind. Let's do a dry off at this point and we'll see what we think. Okay, we should be good. Let me move this off to the side. Let's put a mat over it, sign it, one last look, and then we'll call it. Of course, you know, the usual spiel of, you know, please like, support, and follow. And if you ever follow along with the painting, I would love to see your results. Comment, ask questions, make suggestions. If there's anything you guys ever want me to do or try, I can't promise I'd be that good at it, but I want this channel to be as interactive as possible. And I want us to learn and have fun. If you're ever interested in any of my paintings, just contact me or look on the Etsy account. I don't have every single one of them up there, so, you know, just let me know. Let me shine this light over it. Let's see. Okay, so in the viewfinder, the sign I'm looking at is a little bit darker, so it's a little lighter in person, but I'm really pleased with this combination. Very beautiful color. I hope you all have a great day, and I'll talk to you all soon. Bye.